everyone, this is my very belated July wrap up. I've had a lot going on because I've been house hunting for the past few weeks and I found somewhere. We are still renting, but we paid the holding deposit and we're just sorting out the paperwork now. But basically the house is ours because we're not going to fail our references and credit checks. So we found a 3-bedroom house. I'm going to have a library room. It's going to be fantastic, but that does mean that I'm behind on YouTube videos, which means you're getting a very late July wrap up. The first book I read in July is one that I loved, and that was Vox by Christina Doucher. And this one is a dystopian book quite clearly inspired by The Handmaid's Tale. It's set in the United States and basically women's rights slowly got taken away. It started off with smaller things and eventually at the beginning of the book you get to see that women are now at a point where they only are allocated 100 words a day that they can speak, and if they try to speak more they have this bracelet on that will shock them. So they have to choose their words very, very carefully. It's an absolutely disgusting world, but the author does a fantastic job with it. There is so much tension in this book. The main character is incredible. I loved her journey. I did think that this was going to be a lot darker than it was, because towards the end it started off really quite dark and depressing, but towards the end it got a bit lighter and it was a bit more action and it didn't feel as grim. Really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I then read 21 Lessons for the 21st Century as an audiobook and I loved it. Of course, I love this narrator and the author is also one that I really enjoy. He also wrote Sapiens and Homo Deus, which I haven't read yet. This is non-fiction and it's about 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. He talks about where the human race is going, what's happening to the earth, the history of religion and how it can shape the future and where the future of religion is going. He talks about AI and self-driving cars. It's very, very interesting. I'd highly recommend it, especially as an audiobook. Then I read The Chalkman, which I've had to give back to the library. This is an adult thriller about a guy who has stayed in his hometown. As a child he had a group of friends and they would all draw stick figures to kind of send messages to one another when the others weren't around, because obviously back in the 70s or 80s there were no mobile phones, so they had to write little messages to each other. There's a whole mystery in this book and one of the main things is that the chalk figure starts appearing again, but it's not any of the friends. I have to admit I didn't love this book. I only gave it 3 stars, although I was ready to absolutely adore it. I think it was too much like The Taking of Annie Thorne, which is the author's second book, which I read a couple of months ago, and it was basically the same story over again, which was disappointing because I would have thought that her debut would be better constructed and more original, but no, it was basically the same book twice and it really put me off, so I didn't love this one, unfortunately. I then reread Contagion by Erin Bowman. This is young adult sci-fi / horror. It's about a group of scientists who are called to a planet because there's a distress signal because the ground crew there have all being killed. So they get to this planet and then they discover that there's something like in the water. It's possessing people and it turns people into what is essentially zombies. It's kind of like zombie horror but in space, and they have to, you know, get out of it. And I love this book. I gave it 4 stars like I did the first time I read it, and I cannot wait to read Immunity. I reread Contagion in July because I was recapping it for Recap Tins and I'm so ready to read the sequel. I just haven't had a chance to get my hands on it yet. Another reread for me, because apparently this was the month of rereads, was Lock and Key Volume 1. This is adult horror. It's set in the Key house where the main characters have ended up because their father has died. He's been brutally murdered and they've gone to live in their father's childhood home. In this house there are a ton of keys that do all sorts of different things, like change your gender or transport you to another place. This is the first volume. I love this series so much. I'm so glad that I'm rereading it. The artwork is full colour and it's just stunning. It is very gory, but there are some fantastic moments that gave me shivers, such as this page. That was a really quick look at that because I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a very, very good series. I would highly recommend it. I then listened to The Five as an audiobook. I've talked about this book quite a lot. It's non-fiction and it's about the lives of the victims of Jack the Ripper. Instead of focusing on Jack the Ripper, we're now learning more about the 5 women who were killed, and it's fantastic. I gave it 4 stars. The author does such a good job of the research and figuring out how these women would have been affected by what was going on around them and where they went and things. I've seen some criticisms of the book saying that the author just made stuff up. in that she didn't know for sure how the women were feeling, which is true, but I think by researching the history and getting quite deeply involved in the social history of the time, you can probably figure out what's going on, especially because the author clearly looked up censuses and court records to do her research, and she was able to trace their lives and come to various conclusions, and I found it fantastic. I know a couple of people have already bought the book because of me, so that makes me really happy. The next one I read was really just quite shit, and that is Violent Cases by Neil Gaiman. It's a graphic novel. I can't even really describe what it's about. It seems to be about gangsters. The story didn't really go there. Yeah, this is another Neil Gaiman book that I just did not like, so I gave this one star. I'll be returning it to the library swiftly. Thankfully, I then read a really good book, and that was Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is a kind of utopian dystopian fiction where humans have conquered death, and because of that they have to employ scythes to go around and kill people, because otherwise the population would be too much. And it follows two characters who are chosen to be scythe apprentices, and it's about their journey to become scythes, I guess. And I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I always really enjoy Neil Shusterman's books. He comes up with some really fantastic ideas, and this is quite gory in parts because it's literally about death, but yeah, I did really enjoy this one. I can see why it's so hyped up. I then read a 5-star book, and that was To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. I absolutely adore Becky Chambers books. As you all know, this is only a novella, so it's only just over 100 pages, and it's about a group of scientists who go and research 4 different planets. They are literally just there to research and not to interfere. As always, Becky Chambers books are so hopeful and respectful, and they contain so much diversity as well, and I just love them. Please pick up this book. If you're not sure about Becky Chambers' writing, then I would recommend starting with this one, just because it's 100 pages, you can fly through it. I read it in just a couple of hours. I then read a book I'm not really going to talk much about because you already know what it is, and that is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I didn't love this book by any means. I gave it 3 stars. I think I mainly just struggled with the writing style because it's an older book, but I did quite enjoy the story. It's just some bits were a bit confusing and the author just didn't really describe things that well. And then finally I read another book that was a reread, and that is Locking the Key Volume 2. Obviously I'm not going to talk much about this one either. I gave it 4 stars. This one is also really good, and it contains one of my favourite scenes ever. I will try to find it quickly so that those of you who have read the series will know what I'm talking about. If you don't want to know, maybe look away for a couple of seconds, but this won't take long. This bit here with "My name is Dodge," just amazing. Gave me shivers both times I read it. And then quickly I'm going to talk about my statistics because I haven't done that yet. I'm not really sure whether to put these at the beginning or the end of the video, so if you have any tips, please let me know. I read 12 books in July, and the pages added up to 2,672, which is a bit lower because I mostly read graphic novels and audiobooks. So even though I did read quite a few, I didn't have a high page count. I listened to 1,321 minutes. I gave 1 book 1 star, 1 book 2 stars, 2 books 3 stars, 7 books 4 stars, 1 book 5 stars, and my average rating was 3.4, which is really good. I read books by 5 female authors and 7 male authors. 3 of the books that I read were rereads, 3 of the books that I read were new releases or advanced readers copies, and 8 or 9 were backlist titles. And finally, as for my genres, I read 2 thriller books, 2 non-fiction, 1 literary fiction, 2 horrors, 2 dystopias, 2 sci-fi, and 1 unknown. I'm not really sure how to classify Lord of the Flies. That's it. That's my belated July wrap up. Hope you enjoyed it. From now on, I'm going to be listing all of the books that I read or talk about in my videos in the description box, and I will be including affiliate links. Don't feel pressured to click on them. I'm not making you do anything. It will just be a nice thing for you to do if you want to order the book, because I will get a small percentage of however much you spend. Thank you all so much for watching my video. I'll be back soon with my next one. Bye!